Welcome back, entrepreneurs. Michael Rosmer here with Richucation. We're talking today, once again, about the subject of communication. And we're going to talk about some communication best practices. Okay? So, communication. I probably don't even have to write this one down, but I may have given myself a paper cut there. Best practices. Alrighty. So I remember ones that I was going to mention to you guys. Okay. So these are just like a few random things that I have come across over the years that I've found to be quite effective, or, mistakes that are commonly made, and so it's useful to be able to get around them. Okay? So, first things first. The first one is to do with 100% accountability. All right? So there's a general best practice in life, it's kind of like a personal development thing, that you should take 100% accountability. All right? And the idea is, well, I can only change me. And so if I can only change me, then everything around me, I co-created. Okay? And so if something happened to me or around me or for me or however you want to describe it, I had a hand in it. And so there's no sense in blaming someone or some situation outside of me because I can't change those. All I can change is me. All right? So I take it all on myself and I say, okay, what might I do differently? Now, this is a very effective process from a personal standpoint. This is very ineffective from an interpersonal standpoint, particularly, I don't even know particularly, but in business, okay? So what this can do is this can set somebody else up to be able to blame you, all right? So you want to take 100% accountability and you don't want to communicate that to someone else, all right? That's a personal thing. So I'll give you an example. Say somebody is late, all right? Now, if somebody is late, my effective behavior for me is to say, okay, what have I done that's contributed to this person being late? Maybe I didn't set standards acceptably. Maybe it wasn't communicated clearly what time they're supposed to be here. Maybe it wasn't communicated it's not okay for them to be late. Maybe I didn't have consequences in place. What is it? Maybe I'm setting a bad example by showing up late. Maybe I'm not being, recognized, calling other people out for it, etc. Okay, these are all examples of things that I might be doing that might be contributing to the behavior that's going on. And it's very useful for me to examine that so that I can address those things to help create a change. Okay, so I'm going to change my behavior, and as a result, I'm going to change somebody else's behavior. That being said, when I go talk to that person, there on no planet should I be going, so I realize, this is all my fault. I probably wasn't clear about when this was supposed to happen. And hey, what am I doing wrong? I noticed you're late. What is it that, I might do? No. Do not do that. Your communication is simply, hey, and, there are lots of ways to communicate it, but, the gist of it is like, hey, look, you showed up late to work today. I noticed this is a habit. It's not acceptable. It's not okay. Do you understand? It is very important. You are here at this time. Here's the consequences of how come, why that's important, why we have this rule in place. Okay? If you're not going to abide by this rule, we're going to have to ask you to go work somewhere else. I'm giving you this one warning, and, we can call it a day, okay, it's fine. But if it happens again, then it's done. Okay? I'm clearly stating that is, I'm putting it on them. I'm totally, even though I'm going to change all kinds of things in me, even though I'm self-looking at me, I'm not going to communicate that side to someone else. And it's a thing that I've noticed with a number of people, including myself, okay, that's why I'm bringing it up with you guys, is I've gone and taken personal development courses, and I've seen other people do the same, and they get onto this idea of I'm the source and cause of my world, and, I co-create everything, and I'm 100% accountable for, blah, blah, blah. And these are all, they're useful to make changes. But then what we do is we take them out into our relationships with significant others or with family or with friends or with business associates, employees, etc. And we throw that out there. And no, bad idea. Okay? Are there some cases where you've messed up and it's very valuable and important for you to own up to it? Yes, 100%. If you've genuinely messed up, like clearly this is on me, right? Clearly I made a commitment to you and I violated my commitment. Yes, absolutely. Take accountability for it. Hey, look, I said I was going to do that. I did not do that. I apologize. It's not okay. I understand that it's probably impacted you in these ways. Here's what I'm doing to change it and fix it. Or what might I do? To make it up to you, to fix it, etc. Okay? Genuine apology, etc. Okay? So that is a initial communication best practice. So have 100% accountability. And then don't express it. Okay? So that is one useful best practice. What else have I got here? Oh, yes, okay. Especially in times of change. So it is very important that you, as the leader, the manager, etc., are communicating what's going on to the people around you, to your team. Okay? So there's this idea that, my hands are slippery here. Okay. If you're not communicating, they are speculating. Okay? So here's a general thing. There are certain people who, here's a great example. Some people don't want to share something for fear that, how the person's going to respond. Very often when you don't express, what is going on in their head is way worse than what's going on in reality. Okay? If you want clarity in your organization, okay, if you want to be effective, you need to learn to communicate. Let people know, hey, here's what's going on. Communicate proactively. Hey guys, you might notice this, it's coming up. Okay? We're going to have some changes. This is taking place. I understand, If you have any concerns, please bring them to me. Does anyone have any questions? Raise your hand, whatever. Yes, okay. Yeah, I can answer that question for you, no problem. Right? Hey, some people might have noticed that, I've heard comments that right? So very, very important to be communicating. Communicate what is going on, especially in times of change, but let them know, right? If something comes up, address it. Okay, so very often I've had situations, I had one company where unfortunately we had some toxicity and lots of great learning lessons, but incredibly challenging and painful for me to go through. And at the time, unfortunately, my emotional maturity and communication maturity, etc., wasn't enough to stand and say, hey, look, I know you guys are talking about this. I know this is going on. All right? Here's the situation. Here is, what we're doing about it. Do you have any questions? Here's what's acceptable. It's not acceptable to do this. Okay? Right? Whatever the situation is. So that's an important communication best practice as well. Something else. We often have this idea, I'm going to express this and I'm going to give you then the caveat, which is criticize in private, criticize in private, praise in public. Okay? This is a general best practice. Should you always do this? No. We're not. Sometimes everybody knows there's something worth criticizing. And they need to know that you're addressing it. They need to know that something is going on. Okay? And so I had a situation like this where I was employing, it was my girlfriend at the time, and people, even though I was harder on her, and I was very direct with her, etc., than I was with them because I didn't want to show favoritism and all these kinds of things, and I had, trust, etc. Because I did that in private, they felt like I was doing nothing and that she was getting treated favorably. Okay? Not good. Not useful. All right? So that's an unfortunate situation. So when this is happening, we need to bring it out. Okay? We need to be like, hey, this is happening. All right? If everybody knows this is happening, just bring it out. Okay? And address it. Much healthier. There's a great example. There's a book or a movie called Clear and Present Danger. It's based on a Tom Clancy book. It has Harrison Ford in it. And at the beginning, he gets named like Deputy Director of Intelligence for the Central Intelligence Agency. And right at the beginning of the movie, there was like something had happened that a close friend of the president's had been killed, and it was something to do with drugs. Okay? And they do this meeting. It's Harrison Ford's first meeting with the president. There's all these people, and they're like, don't worry, sir, we have deniability on it. We'll just deny it. And they're like, okay, we're going to deny it. Everybody in agreement? And everybody's like, yeah. And Harrison Ford's like, no, I actually disagree. And everybody's like, oh my God. You can't disagree with the president, this sort of thing. And then he's like, really? Well, what would you do? He says, well, to me, it's kind of like you're trying to contain a bomb after it's already gone off. It's like, I would do the opposite, So if they said, hey, is it true that you're friends with this person? I would say, no, that's not true. We're actually good friends, right? And if they say, is it true you're good friends? I'd say, no, we're lifelong friends. And that way they have nothing to shoot at, okay? This is a very useful communication strategy, all right? So when there is something out there, own it, okay? So when something is out anyway, when something is out anyway, own it. Okay? Do not try and defend it. Okay? Being defensive about something that is accurate doesn't help. It puts you in a position of weakness. You have to defend them. Alright? You're much better off to own it. Like, hey, yes, this happened. Yes, I screwed up. I remember, so I'd learned this lesson from that movie, actually. And a few years later, I was in dive school. I was going to become an underwater welder. And there was so we would do this thing called tending, where there's people who they were like the person on the top, and they were helping the diver. And so there's 3 divers down, and I was one of the tenders. And it was quite a deep dive, so these hoses that we're holding and stuff, they're it's hard to tell how much slack there is because there's a lot of weight. Okay, so mine, I guess, had a bunch of slack in it. And when the one diver came up afterwards, he went to somebody else, kind of assuming that person was the person responsible, and berated them. Right? It was like, hey, you need to make sure you keep this cord. And the guy was like, that wasn't me. He's like, but the guy, he was already invested, so he didn't want to back off, right? He's like, well, I'm not saying you're not, but, just, you need to make sure, and all this stuff. And so I let him go on. I watched this thing happen. And so he's, the guy's like, okay, well, it's not me, whatever. And after he finished, I said to him, I was like, hey, Jerry, did you say that, there was slack on this person? He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, that was me. And all of a sudden, it's like this, oh, here he just went after somebody else when they should have gone after me, and I didn't try and hide from it. I owned up to it. Okay? There's this philosophy I have. I remember somebody getting quite angry about somebody saying something about them. And I had this question. I said, hey, look, is it true? Because if it's true, how come you're angry about it? It's true. You might be uncomfortable with it, but it's true. And if it's not true, then how come you're angry about it? Because it's not true, right? Now, of course, we're affected emotionally by it, etc. But there's something to be said for this, mindset, right? Of there's, real power in acknowledging truth. And in communication, we were talking before about, calling out your emotions. Hey, I'm really uncomfortable with saying this, okay? there's a strategy. This is another kind of best practice. It was called an ass cover or something. I forget. We're going to call it cover your ass. Cover your ass. And it's when you're going to communicate something that is likely to create some sort of an inflammatory action. Okay? And what you do is you call it out in advance. Okay? So I might say, hey, so I have this thing, I'm a little concerned that this is going to come across the wrong way and it's going to make you upset. And I just want you to know in advance that's not my intention. My intention is da-da-da-da, and here we go. Okay? Useful thing. Okay? So that's another valuable thing. So you're calling it out, and then you're mentioning your intention. Okay? So you're stating what your intention is, and the intention, of course, is positive. And so this is kind of like somebody might say, hey, listen, I'm going to criticize you, and I realize you might take offense to that, and it's not my intention. I just see so much like good and potential in you that I think it's like too bad that this little bit is spoiled, and so I want to help you, to improve, and da-da-da, right? Now, will that at 100% diffuse it? No, but it's a great best practice, okay? Much better than the alternatives, which are don't say anything. Well, although sometimes there are cases where you shouldn't say anything, anyway, but don't say anything. Or just going and being blunt and straight out, okay? It is useful to be able to be direct in communication. It's also useful to be indirect, but sometimes the best way is to be able to soften that blow, right? Being direct doesn't mean being a belligerent asshole, right? Sometimes you have to be very, very direct, but you can couch it in certain ways, right? So that's another useful best practice. What are some other useful best practices? There's something that I was taught called a bank shot, okay? So this is when sometimes you can't get through to a person, all right? So they're just they're not acknowledging what it is that you're saying, okay? And you need to get through to them. And so what you can do is a bank shot is where you can go and you can talk about somebody else or deal with somebody else and have them observe it, okay? And so it's the thing that you're addressing applies to this person over here, but you're addressing it over here, all right? So that's another kind of useful thing to be able to call out. What are some other great communication best practices that we can share? Oh, permission-based. Permission-based is very powerful, okay? Permission-based. So this is where I ask you in advance whether it's okay with you if I share it. All right? Say, hey, as an example, are you open to some feedback? Usually people will say yes. Okay. It's hey, I have some ways that, I have some things I observed. Are you open to some feedback? Versus, hey, go and do this. And this is one of the reasons how giving feedback via email is less effective very often. Because if you have unsolicited feedback that's not permission-based, very often people won't receive that well. Do you always do it? No, you don't necessarily, but this is a useful thing, okay? Another thing, when giving feedback, some effective ways to give feedback, all right, is to do something that you separate to some extent the person from the feedback, all right? So the tendency is, you're a fucking asshole. You suck at this, That's not effective feedback. So I run into this all the time. It's really, really annoying. Where I'll ask somebody for feedback, and what they do is they spew their opinions on me. Okay? Spewing your opinions on someone is not giving feedback. Okay? Effective feedback is identifying how behavior links to a result. Hey, when you do this, it comes across as this. When you do this, here's what happens. That's much more effective. People are much more likely to receive it than the alternative. And this is when we went back before, we were talking about the what works and what doesn't work language, right? So, hey, when you, yell and scream, etc., here's what it makes me feel. when you do this, here's what happens. Okay? Now the whole point here is that feedback is just information, right? It's not right, wrong, good, bad, etc. But if you can put it in this context where it's very behavioral and results based, here's the behavior, here's the result, or the outcome, then all of a sudden the person puts them in a position where they get to evaluate for themselves whether that's their intention. And I found this, I was having a conversation recently with a friend, and I'd gone through a period of getting some negative responses to some of the way that I was coming across, all right? And people would be, oh, you're in the right. No, that person's an idiot. And I'd check in with people and say, hey, was what I said inappropriate? Was I did it on the right? No, that person's just an idiot. That person's just whatever, right? And I had to sit back and say, well, here's the problem. Maybe maybe that's accurate. Maybe the person, was just overly sensitive or, whatever, right? They were crazy. But was my intention to elicit the result that I did? No, it was not. What was my intention? Because if I wasn't getting my intention met through the behavior that I was doing, through the communication that I was doing, then I need to alter my communication, all right? And so I ended up making some changes, and so then a friend of mine was being quite inflammatory in terms of the type of very judgmental, opinion-based language that he was using, right? And so I called him out on it. He's a close friend who I respect immensely. I said, hey, look, you know what? Do you notice that everything you just said here, it was like in an online context, like able to quote the paragraph or whatever, everything there was opinion-based and judgment-based, okay? Now, those opinions and judgments might be accurate, but are you aware that when you communicate that way, this is the reaction that instills? And is that what you're aiming to do? If it is, that's fine. But here's my experience is, I went through this, and, if you communicate in this way, then it tends to be more effective to actually create change. So, be aware of that. And that was, a big piece. So I hope that helps. I hope these give you some great communication best practices. Oh, the last one was, let's see here. Okay. In the moment management, we talked really briefly about this before. This is just sometimes or very often when something happens, the best time to address it is not right in that moment. Okay? Because in that moment, A, there could be other people around and it can mess up the dynamic, or B, you can be in a situation where there's like emotions at play and those emotions are going to get in the way. Okay? So ideally what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to say, okay, make a note of that, come back to it afterwards, say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you about this. Okay, so hopefully that helps. If you guys want some support and assistance on this, reach out to us, join the action classes. I'm going to see you guys on the next video.